The air in courtroom 3B hung heavy, thick with the scent of old paper, polished wood, and underlying tension. Mr. Thomas Ashton sat quietly in the back row of the spectator section, a man seemingly carved from the gray, unassuming stone of routine. His clothes were simple, neat, worn. His hands, clasped loosely in his lap, were calloused, the hands of someone who had worked hard, perhaps all his life. He watched the proceedings with an intensity that belied his outward calm. His eyes, the color of worn leather, following the lawyers, the witness, the judge. No one paid him any mind. He was just another face in the anonymous crowd, here for reasons unknown, unnoticed. The trial was for a case involving a complex property dispute, tangled webs of ownership and intent stretching back years. It was dry, technical, the kind of legal battle fought on paper and through careful, often tedious testimony. Most spectators had glazed eyes, minds wandering. But Mr. Ashton listened, really listened, his gaze fixed on the witness currently on the stand. This witness, a man named Mr. Sterling, projected an air of slick confidence. Dressed in a suit that probably cost more than Ashton's annual income, he spoke with smooth articulation, answering questions about boundary lines, historical agreements, and verbal contracts long past. His testimony seemed to align with the intricate diagrams and documents presented by the plaintiff's side. Everything seemed to be proceeding as planned for them. But as Mr. Sterling spoke, something in Thomas Ashton shifted. A subtle tightening around his eyes, a minute clenching of his jaw. The calm facade didn't crack, but became brittle, like thin ice over deep water. He listened to Sterling describe a crucial meeting that supposedly took place years ago, detailing specific words exchanged, agreements reached. Sterling's voice was steady, persuasive, painting a picture of a clear, undisputed negotiation. Thomas Ashton knew, with a certainty that vibrated through his bones, that it was a lie. He knew because he had been there, not as a principal, not even as a witness meant to be recorded, but simply as the person tasked with serving the coffee, setting up the room, present in the periphery. He had been the invisible help, the kind of person people forgot were even there. He had heard the actual conversation, the hesitant questions, the lack of firm agreement, the exact words that were pointedly missing from Sterling's polished account. The lie wasn't a small embellishment. It was foundational, twisting the history of the dispute, assigning intent where none existed, fabricating consent. It was a lie designed to steal, pure and simple, cloaked in legalese and delivered with professional ease. And sitting there, a silent observer in the back row, Thomas Ashton felt the weight of it pressing down on him. The injustice was palpable, a physical ache in his chest. He saw the judge nodding along, the jury looking convinced, the defense lawyer struggling to poke holes in the seemingly airtight story. No one saw him. No one would expect the quiet man in the back to have any knowledge of this complex, high-stakes negotiation. His presence there years ago was incidental, his current presence accidental, perhaps a morbid curiosity about the outcome of events he'd witnessed from the shadows. He was the definition of an unreliable source to anyone who bothered to notice him at all. What could he do? He was a nobody here, his word against a respected, well-dressed man on the stand, backed by expensive lawyers and seemingly corroborating documents. He had no proof, just memory, the vivid, sharp memory of someone who had learned to observe everything while being seen as nothing. Standing up, speaking out would be foolish, disruptive, immediately dismissed. It would change nothing, except maybe get him removed from the courtroom for being a disturbance. But the lie continued, weaving its deceitful spell. It wasn't just about property anymore. It was about the system, about truth, about whether lies delivered confidently could simply become fact if nobody challenged them. It gnawed at him, a corrosive feeling of complicity in silence. He thought of the people this lie would harm, the rightful owners who would lose their claim based on this fiction. He thought of everything he had fought for, everything he had sacrificed, the principles he had lived by, and he found he could not sit still. The ache in his chest sharpened, became a burning resolve. What was the point of witnessing injustice if you let it pass unchecked? What was the value of truth if it remained unspoken? His quiet dignity, His years of being overlooked solidified not into meekness, but into a powerful, silent strength. He took a breath, deep and steady, the kind he used to take before moments that mattered, moments that required everything he had. He pushed himself up from the hard bench, his joints protesting softly. His movement drew a few curious glances from nearby spectators, but the focus remained on the witness. He walked slowly, deliberately, down the side aisle towards the front, his worn shoes making soft, measured sounds on the hushed carpet. Mr. Sterling was just finishing a particularly damning sentence, cementing the fabricated agreement as fact. The plaintiff's lawyer offered a small, satisfied smile, and then Thomas Ashton stopped, not far from the bar separating the public from the official participants. He stood tall, his posture straight, commanding a presence that had been invisible moments before. His voice, when it came, wasn't loud, but it was clear, steady, and resonated with an undeniable weight. "Lies," he said. One word. Simple, direct, undeniably disruptive. The effect was instantaneous and total. The courtroom froze. Mr. Sterling, mid-smirk, visibly flinched, his eyes wide with shock and sudden anger. The plaintiff's lawyer spun around, face contorted in outrage. The judge, Judge Thompson, a woman known for her strict control of her courtroom, slammed her gavel down with a crack that echoed like a gunshot. "Order! Order in the court!" she bellowed, her face red with fury. She glared at Thomas Ashton, her eyes sharp and unforgiving. "Who are you? How dare you interrupt these proceedings?" Thomas stood his ground, meeting her gaze without flinching. He didn't shout back, didn't plead. He just stood there, the quiet center of the sudden storm. "Deputies!" Judge Thompson roared, pointing a furious finger at him. "Remove this man. Charge him with contempt of court." Two burly court deputies moved quickly towards him, their faces set in grim determination. They reached him, grabbing his arms firmly, starting to turn him towards the doors at the back. He didn't resist, didn't struggle against their hold. He let them guide him, their grip tight, as they half-walked, half-dragged him back down the aisle, away from the bench, away from the witness stand, away from the lie that still hung in the air. He turned his head. He looked not at the deputies or the lawyers or even the judge, but out at the rows of spectators, at the jury, at the silent, watchful faces. His gaze swept across them, carrying a message deeper than words. And then he spoke again, his voice still clear, carrying across the stunned silence that had followed the judge's outburst. "I took bullets for this country," he said, his voice raw with something that wasn't just anger, but profound disappointment. "And now I'm watching it shoot itself in the foot." The words hung in the air, heavy with history, sacrifice, and sorrow. The deputies paused, their grip loosening almost imperceptibly as they processed what he had said. Judge Thompson, gavel still in hand, remained frozen, her mouth slightly ajar. The lawyers were speechless. The jury members stared, some leaning forward, their faces etched with surprise, confusion, and a dawning curiosity. The courtroom was utterly silent. A pin dropping would have sounded like an explosion. Thomas Ashton, the unassuming man from the back row, had stopped time, stopped the proceedings, stopped everything with a single word and a powerful, unexpected truth. They continued to guide him out, the doors swinging open to the hallway, but the impact of his statement lingered, settling over the room like a shroud. He was gone, but his words remained. "I took bullets for this country." Watching it shoot itself in the foot. What did he mean? Who was this man? The questions rippled through the stunned silence, unasked but loudly present in every mind. Judge Thompson slowly lowered her gavel, her eyes distant, processing. The slick confidence had drained from Mr. Sterling's face, replaced by a nervous pallor. The narrative of the trial, so carefully constructed, had been shattered by a voice from the periphery. What happened next was unprecedented in that courtroom. Judge Thompson didn't immediately resume the trial. She didn't call the next witness. She simply sat there for a long moment, looking at the closed doors through which Mr. Ashton had been taken. A deputy re-entered the courtroom, looking uncertain. The judge finally spoke, her voice quieter now, the fury replaced by something else, something introspective. "Detain that man," she instructed the deputy, but her tone was different. "Do not book him. Do not process him for contempt yet. Just keep him in the holding area and find out who he is." A flurry of hushed activity followed. The deputy left. The lawyers exchanged bewildered glances. The jury remained watchful. Judge Thompson called a recess, the official reason being to restore order, but everyone in the room knew it was something more. The carefully maintained facade of the trial had been cracked open, and an inconvenient truth, delivered by an unexpected messenger, had fallen into the gap. In the small, sterile holding room, Mr. Thomas Ashton sat on a hard bench, guarded by one of the deputies who had escorted him out. The deputy, a young man named Miller, kept glancing at him, his expression a mixture of curiosity and respect. He had heard the statement about taking bullets. It wasn't the kind of thing people said lightly in a courtroom. Thomas felt a weariness settle over him, but no regret. He had done what he had to do. The lie was exposed, at least challenged. Whether it would make a difference remained to be seen. He closed his eyes for a moment, the images flashing behind his lids. The dust of a foreign land, the harsh sun, the sudden impact that stole his breath and reshaped his life. Taking bullets wasn't a metaphor for him. Deputy Miller cleared his throat. "Mr. Ashton," he said hesitantly, "the judge wants to know. Who are you?" Thomas opened his eyes. He looked at the deputy, a faint, almost sad smile touching his lips. "Just a citizen, deputy," he replied softly. "One who believes the truth matters, especially here." Meanwhile, fueled by the judge's quiet command, a senior court clerk was making inquiries. The name Thomas Ashton wasn't immediately familiar in current legal circles, but a search through older records, through military databases requested under the judge's authority, began to paint a picture. The picture that emerged was startling, contradicting every assumption one might make about the quiet man in the back row. The clerk discovered that Thomas Ashton wasn't just a citizen who had taken bullets. He was a highly decorated veteran, a former intelligence officer with a background in logistics and strategic analysis. His service record was impeccable, marked by valor and commendations. He had worked in environments where keen observation, truth verification, and understanding complex situations were literally matters of life and death. His taking bullets wasn't a figure of speech. It was a reference to a specific, documented injury sustained in the line of duty, one that had ended his military career prematurely and led him to a quieter, less visible life. Further investigation, spurred by the judge's urgency, revealed that Mr. Ashton had, in fact, been present at the location and during the time frame of the meeting Mr. Sterling had described on the stand. Not as a participant, but in a support role that would have placed him within earshot of the critical conversation, unnoticed by the principals. His presence was verifiable through old site logs and personnel records. The deputy returned to the holding cell, his eyes wide, holding a printout. "Mr. Ashton," he said, his voice filled with a new, unmistakable respect. "The judge. She wants you back in the courtroom. Not for the contempt charge. She wants you to testify." Thomas Ashton felt a surge of something he hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. He hadn't sought this, hadn't wanted to be seen, but if his quiet presence and sudden outburst could serve truth, then so be it. He nodded, rising from the bench. "All right, deputy," he said. "Let's go." The next day, the atmosphere in courtroom 3B was dramatically different. The tension was still there, but it was mixed with an electric current of anticipation and confusion. The press, alerted to the previous day's unusual events, filled the media rows. Mr. Sterling looked distinctly uncomfortable, shuffling papers and avoiding eye contact. The jury seemed more alert than ever, buzzing with silent questions. Judge Thompson entered, her demeanor serious, even somber. She addressed the court, acknowledging the unfortunate disruption, but stating that new information has come to light which requires adjustment of the trial's direction. She then made an announcement that shocked many. Mr. Thomas Ashton, previously removed and facing contempt charges, would be called as a court witness. Thomas Ashton walked back into the courtroom, not in the custody of deputies, but escorted by Deputy Miller, who held the door open for him with a deference he hadn't shown the previous day. He walked to the witness stand, swore the oath, his hand steady on the Bible. He sat down, facing the courtroom, facing the judge, facing Mr. Sterling, who now looked positively green. The initial questions were simple, establishing his identity, his background, his presence at the location of the meeting years ago. Thomas answered calmly, his voice still clear, steady, his answers concise and factual. He didn't embellish, didn't grandstand. He simply stated the facts as he knew them. Then came the crucial part. The questioning turned to the specific conversation Mr. Sterling had testified about. Thomas recounted the actual exchange, the hesitation, the points of disagreement, the absence of the definitive statements Sterling had claimed were made. He described the atmosphere, the body language, the details that stuck in his mind because he had been observing quietly, professionally, as was his training. His testimony wasn't based on legal interpretation or financial documents. It was based on direct, human observation, filtered through the trained mind of someone whose job had once been to discern truth from deception in high-pressure situations. His answers were simple but carried immense weight, implicitly contrasting with Sterling's elaborate fabrication. The plaintiff's lawyer tried to cross-examine him, attempting to discredit him as a mere service personnel, a passerby, someone whose memory couldn't possibly be reliable about such complex matters. But Thomas Ashton calmly, respectfully, parried every attack. When asked about his qualifications for accurate observation, he simply stated his former profession and rank, letting his decorated military record speak for itself. When questioned about motive, he simply stated he had none, other than the belief that truth should prevail in a court of law. "I served my country to protect the principles it stands for, Mr. Counsel," Thomas said, looking the lawyer squarely in the eye. "One of those principles is justice based on truth. I saw a lie being told under oath, and my conscience compelled me to speak." His quiet dignity, his unwavering calm, his undeniable credibility forged in the crucible of military service, dismantled the lawyer's attempts to paint him as unreliable or malicious. He wasn't loud or aggressive. He was simply truthful, under oath, backed by a history of service and validated presence. The power dynamic in the courtroom had flipped entirely. Mr. Sterling's earlier smooth performance now seemed hollow, theatrical, tainted by the stark, simple truth offered by Thomas Ashton. The jury listened intently, their earlier skepticism towards the outburst replaced by a clear focus on the contrasting testimonies. Judge Thompson watched Thomas with a look of deep respect. What followed was swift and decisive. Faced with Thomas Ashton's credible, verified testimony, and perhaps sensing the shift in the jury's perception, the plaintiff's case began to crumble. The defense lawyer, now emboldened, seized on the discrepancy, highlighting the blatant perjury committed by Mr. Sterling. The judge, seeing the clear contradiction and the evidence of Sterling's dishonesty, took immediate action. Before the day was over, the judge declared a mistrial, citing fundamental issues of witness credibility that had irreparably tainted the proceedings. More significantly, she ordered an immediate investigation into Mr. Sterling for perjury. His smug confidence had vanished entirely, replaced by fear as deputies approached him, this time not to escort him to a waiting car, but to the courthouse holding cells. The man who had sat unnoticed in the back row, removed in disgrace, was now the unexpected architect of truth, the catalyst for accountability. Word of the events in courtroom 3B spread quickly through the courthouse, then into the local news. The story of the quiet veteran who spoke truth to power, who challenged a lie at personal risk and changed the course of justice, captured public imagination. Thomas Ashton, who had spent years in quiet anonymity after his service, was suddenly, reluctantly, a figure of public interest. The property dispute case would be retried, this time presumably with honest testimony. Mr. Sterling faced serious charges, his reputation and freedom on the line, all because he underestimated the man in the back row. The plaintiff's case was severely weakened, built as it was on a foundation of lies. For Thomas Ashton, there were repercussions, but not the negative ones he might have expected. The contempt charge was immediately dropped by Judge Thompson, with a formal apology issued both privately and in open court, praising his courage and integrity. Unexpectedly, the publicity brought him opportunities. People reached out, impressed by his character and quiet strength. He received offers of work, positions where his intelligence, integrity, and keen observational skills would be valued, not overlooked. He hadn't sought fame or reward. He had simply acted because the lie felt like a desecration of everything he believed in, everything he had fought for. His statement about taking bullets for the country and watching it shoot itself in the foot resonated deeply with many who felt a similar frustration with dishonesty and corruption in public life. His actions sparked conversations about who is truly seen, who is heard, and the value of truth regardless of the messenger's apparent status. It highlighted how easy it is to overlook the quiet ones, the ones without expensive suits or loud voices, who may hold crucial truths. The case became a local legend, a reminder that justice can sometimes find the most unlikely champions, that integrity, even when inconvenient, holds a power that lies delivered with confidence can never truly match. That service to one's country, whether on a battlefield or in a courtroom back row, is about upholding its values. Thomas Ashton, the man who had been overlooked for so long, found himself seen, not for the uniform he no longer wore or the injuries he carried, but for the unwavering core of honesty and courage that defined him. His quiet life changed, not into something loud or flashy, but into something purposeful, where his unique strengths were finally recognized and utilized. He remained a man of quiet dignity, but no longer unnoticed. His simple act of speaking truth became a powerful testament to the idea that every voice matters, that integrity is a form of strength, and that even in the face of overwhelming deception, one person's commitment to truth can be a force strong enough to change the world, one courtroom, one lie at a time. What does this story teach us? It reminds us that we should never judge people based on appearances or status. The most profound truths, the most impactful actions, can come from the most unexpected places, from individuals who have been overlooked, underestimated, or rendered invisible by society's assumptions. It teaches us about the corrosive nature of lies, especially when they infect systems designed to uphold justice, and the moral courage it takes to stand against them, even when it means disrupting the status quo or facing personal repercussions. It shows that true patriotism isn't just about grand gestures or national symbols, but about upholding the fundamental principles of truth and justice in everyday life, in every setting, including a seemingly mundane courtroom. And perhaps most importantly, it serves as a powerful call to action. Are you a silent witness to injustice? Do you see lies being told, wrongs being committed, because it's easier to stay quiet, safer to remain unseen? Remember Thomas Ashton. Remember the weight of his one word, the power of his simple truth. Your voice, your integrity, your willingness to stand up for what is right holds more power than you know. Don't let the world shoot itself in the foot because you were afraid to speak. Be brave enough to say lies. Be brave enough to stand for truth. Your courage might just change everything. The quietest voices can hold the loudest truths.